Anna's life was perfect, or so it seemed. Married to Mark, a successful entrepreneur, and mother to 2 beautiful children, everything was supposed to be in place. But behind closed doors, something was missing. When David Hargrave, Mark's charming and powerful boss, entered the picture, Anna found herself caught in a web of lies and forbidden attraction. What started as innocent flirtation quickly spiraled into a passionate affair that would unravel everything she held dear. As Anna navigated her secret world with David, she never imagined the shocking betrayal that would soon shatter her family, until the truth came crashing down, and the consequences were far more devastating than she could ever have anticipated. Anna and Mark Thompson had always appeared to live the kind of life most people could only dream about. They were the quintessential suburban couple, seemingly made for each other. Mark, a rising star at a prestigious financial firm, had spent years working tirelessly to climb the corporate ladder. He was driven, ambitious, and incredibly proud of his achievements. His efforts had paid off in the form of a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood, 2 young children, and a picture-perfect life that many would envy. Anna, on the other hand, was the epitome of grace and charm. She had given up a promising career in marketing when they started a family, choosing instead to stay at home and raise their 2 children. She was the heartbeat of their home, organizing everything from school events to family vacations. When he said she wasn't tending to her children, Anna spent her free time running a small art gallery, a passion project she had started on the side. Her life revolved around her family, and she had always felt proud of the life she and Mark had built together. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. Their social media accounts were filled with family photos, vacations, and celebrations. Mark's career was flourishing, and Anna had found a sense of fulfillment in her role as both a mother and a businesswoman. Their friends often referred to them as the golden couple, admired for their success, their apparent happiness, and the loving way they interacted with each other. But beneath the surface, things were beginning to change. Mark's career had begun to demand more and more of his time. His hours at the office were getting longer, and the once regular dinners at home were becoming less frequent. Mark would come home late after a long day of meetings, too tired to engage in much conversation with Anna. He was focused on his work, consumed by his desire to climb higher in the company, and his ambition seemed to overshadow the needs of his family. Anna, who had always supported him, began to feel a sense of loneliness creeping in. At first, she tried to ignore the growing distance between them, telling herself it was just a phase. She understood that Mark's job was demanding, and she knew that his success was important to him. But as the weeks turned into months, the silence between them became harder to bear. The affection they once shared seemed to disappear, replaced by polite exchanges and the routine of everyday life. Anna found herself filling the empty spaces in their home with small distractions, long walks, evenings alone, and more time spent at the art gallery. Still, the ache of neglect grew. As Mark became more absorbed in his work, Anna began to feel as though she had lost her sense of identity. She had been a wife and mother for so long, but she was beginning to wonder if she had sacrificed too much of herself along the way. The gallery, though fulfilling, was only a small part of her life, and it could never replace the emotional connection she craved. Her relationship with Mark had always been her foundation, but now that foundation felt fragile, cracked by his absence. It was in this space of emotional isolation that Anna met someone who would change everything. She had always enjoyed the occasional social event hosted by Mark's company, but it wasn't until one of these events that she crossed paths with David Hargrave, Mark's boss. David was everything Anna found intriguing, charismatic, confident, and effortlessly charming. He had an air of sophistication that captivated her, and his genuine interest in her thoughts and opinions felt like a breath of fresh air. The conversations they shared that night were light and easy, and there was an undeniable chemistry between them that Anna couldn't ignore. Over the following weeks, Anna and David found themselves talking more and more. At first, it was nothing more than casual conversations at company events. But soon, they started to communicate outside of those gatherings. David would send her messages about art exhibitions or share articles that he thought she'd enjoy. He seemed genuinely interested in her life, something Anna hadn't experienced in a long time. She found herself looking forward to these messages, eagerly anticipating their next conversation. As she spent more time with David, she couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement that she hadn't felt in years. He made her feel seen and appreciated in ways Mark no longer did. It wasn't intentional, but Anna found herself confiding in David, telling him things about her life and her marriage that she had kept to herself. The more they talked, the deeper their connection became. David's attention filled the void left by Mark's neglect, and it was intoxicating. For Anna, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one she had never imagined. She didn't know where it would lead, but she couldn't deny the magnetic pull she felt toward David. What started as innocent conversations began to blur the lines. As weeks passed, Anna found herself becoming increasingly drawn to David Hargrave. What had started as innocent, friendly chats had evolved into something much more intense. David's messages and casual check-ins seemed harmless at first, but soon they began to mean more to her than she had ever expected. She found herself eagerly awaiting his texts and emails, a stark contrast to the empty silence that often filled her home. Each message from David made her feel seen and valued in ways that Mark's growing indifference never had. David was everything Mark wasn't. He was confident, always impeccably dressed, and carried himself with an aura of power and control that drew people in. He wasn't just Mark's boss. He was the kind of man who commanded attention in every room he entered. There was something magnetic about him, a charm that could captivate even the most stoic of individuals. When Anna was around him, she felt alive, as though the world outside their conversations and moments together simply didn't exist. She had always admired Mark's ambition, but with David, she felt like she was seen for who she truly was. The more time Anna spent with David, the more she realized how much she had been missing in her marriage. The constant pressure Mark felt at work had consumed him to the point where he no longer had the energy or desire to connect with her. Their once thriving relationship had faded into routine. They shared a house, children, and responsibilities, but the spark between them was long gone. David, on the other hand, made her feel desired, and it wasn't just about the compliments or the attention he gave her. It was about the way he made her feel important, like she mattered in a way that Mark hadn't made her feel in years. At first, Anna tried to brush aside her growing feelings for David. She told herself it was just a harmless friendship, a bit of attention she was missing in her life. She wasn't looking for anything more. Yet, as their conversations grew more personal, she found it harder and harder to deny the attraction between them. They would talk late into the night, discussing everything from art to family to their own private fears and desires. The boundaries between them began to blur. What started as innocent flirtation turned into deeper, more intimate conversations. David never pushed her to go further than she was comfortable with, but there was an undeniable tension between them. The way he looked at her when they spoke, the way his gaze lingered just a little too long. It all made Anna feel as though something more was possible. And yet, she hesitated. She couldn't bring herself to betray her husband, even though the emotional distance between them seemed to grow wider by the day. As the months went on, the affair was no longer just an emotional connection. It had begun to turn into something physical. It started with small touches, an accidental brush of the hand, a lingering hug at the end of a conversation. But soon, those moments became more intentional. David was patient, never rushing her, but he always made it clear that he desired her. Anna had never felt so wanted, and the attraction she had been trying to suppress only grew stronger with each passing day. There was a sense of excitement that came with their secret, something thrilling about the idea of doing something forbidden. They met in places where no one could find them, quiet cafes, upscale restaurants, even the back office of David's office building. Each encounter felt like a stolen moment of freedom, and it made Anna feel as though she was escaping from the monotony of her everyday life. She felt more alive in those stolen moments than she had in years. Yet even as their physical relationship began to grow more intense, Anna struggled with guilt. She couldn't shake the thought of her children, of Mark. She knew that what she was doing was wrong, but the need for validation and attention had clouded her judgment. She had told herself that Mark no longer cared about her, that he was too absorbed in his career to notice her needs. But deep down, she knew that she was making a choice, one that would have consequences. Still, the allure of David was too powerful to resist. He was everything Mark wasn't, and he had become an escape from the emotional emptiness she had been feeling for so long. With each passing day, Anna found herself more deeply entangled in the affair, unable to extricate herself from the pull of her desires. She was falling for David, and as much as she tried to fight it, she knew that there was no going back. The affair became her secret world, a place where she could forget about the strain in her marriage and the life she had once known. The attention, the excitement, the passion. These things filled the emptiness inside her, and for the first time in a long time, Anna felt desired. She had crossed a line, and she knew it. But she couldn't bring herself to stop. The consequences, she thought, could wait. As the affair between Anna and David deepened, it became increasingly difficult for Anna to separate her two lives. On one hand, there was her family, her children, and the facade of a marriage that, while outwardly functional, was slowly crumbling under the weight of unspoken discontent. On the other hand, there was the intoxicating world she shared with David, one filled with excitement, passion, and the kind of attention that had long been missing from her life. The two worlds were colliding, and Anna found herself struggling to keep up the charade. At home, the tension between Anna and Mark had become more palpable. Mark's once present warmth had all but vanished, replaced by a distant politeness. They exchanged pleasantries in the morning, the quick peck on the cheek before Mark left for work, but those small gestures of affection were increasingly rare. Anna tried to ignore it, distracting herself with her gallery and the constant demands of her children. But there was no denying that the emotional gap between her and Mark had widened beyond repair. Anna's behavior began to change, and it didn't take long for Mark to notice. He had always prided himself on being attentive to his family, even if his work had consumed much of his time. He knew something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He found himself wondering why Anna had become so distant, why she spent more and more time at the gallery and less with him and the children. Her moods shifted unpredictably. One moment, she was cordial and polite. The next, she was lost in thought, staring off into space as though she were somewhere else entirely. Mark tried to talk to her about it, but his attempts were met with vague excuses. She was busy, tired, or simply had a lot on her plate. Yet as much as Anna tried to deflect, Mark felt something was amiss. But it wasn't just Mark who noticed the changes in Anna. Their friends began to comment on her behavior too. At social gatherings, Anna seemed distracted, often looking at her phone or excusing herself early. She no longer enjoyed the outings they used to share, opting instead to stay behind or leave early. Mark's colleagues, who had once admired Anna for her warm and engaging personality, were starting to ask him if everything was all right. They noticed the shift, the way Anna seemed withdrawn, always preoccupied and often avoiding eye contact. It wasn't long before the affair began to take a toll on Anna's emotional state. What had started as an exciting escape from her unfulfilled marriage soon became something more complicated. She was no longer just having an affair for the thrill of it. She was falling for David. The feelings she had tried to keep at bay had taken root, and she was torn between the guilt of betraying Mark and the allure of a future with David. David, meanwhile, was becoming more vocal about his desire for her. The stolen moments they shared were no longer enough. He pushed her to consider leaving Mark, to start a new life with him. David promised her a future where she wouldn't have to play the part of the dutiful wife, where she could be free to pursue her desires without the restrictions of her current life. Anna was torn. On one hand, there was the life she had built, with Mark, the stability of her children, and the memories of their early years together. But on the other, there was David, offering her the chance to feel truly seen and wanted again. Every conversation with him left her more confused, and yet, she couldn't deny the excitement she felt when they were together. The connection she had with David was unlike anything she had ever experienced, and it left her questioning everything she thought she knew about herself, her marriage, and what she truly wanted. As the days passed, Anna found herself caught in a web of lies. She had learned how to hide the affair with David, using every excuse in the book to cover up her late nights, the missed calls, the unexplained absences. She became more adept at lying to Mark, masking her guilt behind a facade of normalcy. She was careful, too careful, and Mark had no idea. But the guilt weighed on her heavily, and she began to feel the emotional toll of keeping up the duality of her life. At the same time, David's influence over her grew stronger. His power, his confidence, and his unwavering belief that she deserved more were like a drug, and Anna couldn't shake the feeling that, with him, she could have everything she ever wanted. David had already made it clear that he was willing to do whatever it took to be with her, and the more he whispered these promises in her ear, the harder it became for Anna to imagine returning to her old life with Mark. Still, the reality of what she was doing loomed over her. Anna had always prided herself on being a good mother, a supportive wife, and a woman with strong values. But the affair had turned her life upside down, and with each passing day, she felt herself sinking deeper into a life. The breaking point came unexpectedly, on an ordinary evening when Anna had convinced herself that everything was under control. She had spent the day as usual, running errands, taking care of the children, managing her art gallery. Mark was scheduled to work late again, and Anna had already made plans to meet David afterward. She had become so adept at managing her double life that it no longer felt like a burden. The secret affair had become a routine, almost like a second existence that she had mastered. She kept the lies hidden well, believing that she could keep it all under wraps without anyone noticing. But that evening, something was different. Anna's phone buzzed just after dinner, a message from David. She smiled, glancing at it, and almost instinctively she reached for her phone again as she tucked it into her bag. However, something felt off, a prickling sensation that made her feel uneasy. Her eyes met Mark's across the table. He was unusually quiet, staring into his plate, but his expression had changed. It was as if he was waiting for something. She tried to ignore the rising anxiety in her chest and continue with the evening, but the tension between them was palpable. It was the first time in months that she truly felt like Mark was paying attention to her. Later that evening, after the children had gone to bed, Mark dropped a bombshell. Without warning, he came into the living room, his voice unusually low. "I know," he said, his words hanging in the air like a cold wind. "I know something's been going on." Anna's heart skipped a beat. She froze, her body suddenly rigid. She tried to respond, but her words caught in her throat. Mark wasn't angry, but there was something in his tone, an edge of quiet certainty that sent a chill down her spine. For a moment, the room seemed to grow smaller. The walls felt like they were closing in on her, and her mind raced, searching for an explanation, a way to deflect, to deny. But deep down, she knew there was no easy way out. Mark had seen through her. The lies, the late nights, the absence, it had all caught up with her. She had thought she could juggle both worlds, but now it was clear that the facade was crumbling. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, Mark's next words cut through the silence. "It's him, isn't it? David Hargrave." Anna's stomach dropped. The truth, once hidden so carefully, was now out in the open. She had no defense, no justification. Mark had been watching her closely, noticing the changes, the way her behavior had shifted over the past months. The strange distance between them had not gone unnoticed. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the subtle mood swings, all of it had added up in Mark's mind. The clues had been there all along, and now he had put them together. Mark's face was unreadable, his jaw tight. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He simply stood there, his eyes filled with disappointment and hurt that Anna had never seen before. Anna felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under her. She hadn't planned for this moment. She had expected to keep her secret hidden, to carry on with her affair without the consequences catching up to her. But now Mark knew. The weight of her actions hit her harder than she could have anticipated. "What do you want me to say?" Anna whispered, her voice breaking. She could feel the tears welling up in her eyes, but she fought them back, trying to maintain control. Mark took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "I want you to tell me the truth. I deserve that, don't I? After everything we've been through, don't I deserve the truth?" Anna couldn't look him in the eye anymore. She lowered her head, the guilt and shame suffocating her. She had betrayed him in the worst possible way, and there was no escaping that fact. The man she had married, the man she had promised to spend her life with, had been blindsided by her lies. She had shattered the trust between them, and now there was no taking it back. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick, suffocating, filled with the weight of the truth that hung in the air. Finally, Anna broke the silence. "Yes, it's him," she admitted softly, her voice barely audible. "I've been seeing him for months." Mark's face remained stoic, but Anna could see the pain in his eyes, the heartbreak that was starting to show beneath the facade of calm. "Why?" he asked, his voice strained. "Why would you do this? After everything we've built, after everything we've gone through together. Why him?" Anna swallowed hard, trying to find the right words, but she couldn't. The truth felt like 1,000 pounds pressing against her chest. She had no rational explanation, no justification that would make it okay. She couldn't bring herself to say the words, couldn't explain that it wasn't about Mark. It was about her own emptiness. It wasn't David she was after. It was the validation, the feeling of being wanted. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and regret. Mark had left that night, retreating to a hotel for a few days to give them both space. Anna spent her time pacing the house, unable to focus on anything. Her mind was consumed with the consequences of her actions, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mark's face, the look of betrayal and heartbreak that she had caused. She had always known deep down that an affair was dangerous, but she never imagined it would lead to this, destroying her family, her marriage, and the life she had worked so hard to build. Despite the weight of the situation, David continued to send her messages, as if nothing had changed. He was still there, offering his support, his comfort, his promises of a future together. But Anna couldn't bring herself to engage in their conversations with the same enthusiasm. The guilt gnawed at her constantly, and she found herself distancing herself from him. What had once been thrilling now felt like a trap, a reminder of the mistakes she had made. The worst part was that she couldn't bring herself to end things with David. There was an undeniable pull that kept her tethered to him, despite everything that had happened. She wanted to believe that she could find solace in him, that he would be the one to help her through this crisis. But each message, each call, made her feel more hollow inside. The affair was no longer the escape it had once been. It had become a symbol of her deepest failures. Mark's return was inevitable, and when he walked back through the door, Anna felt a mix of relief and dread. He hadn't said much since that, only that he needed time. But now they were forced to face the reality of what had happened between them. He had asked for a meeting with a therapist, and Anna reluctantly agreed, hoping that they could begin the painful process of rebuilding trust, even though she knew it might be too late. The therapy sessions were difficult, to say the least. The walls that Anna had carefully constructed over the years, the ones that kept her emotions and needs hidden, came crashing down, piece by piece. Mark's pain was raw and evident, and every time he spoke about how deeply she had hurt him, Anna felt a new layer of guilt weigh down on her. She had shattered his trust, and no amount of words could undo the damage she had done. But it wasn't just Mark's pain that tore at her. It was her own. Anna had spent years pushing her needs aside to support her family, to be the perfect wife and mother. She had convinced herself that everything was fine, that the distance in her marriage was just a temporary phase. She had convinced herself that the attention she found from David was harmless, a way to escape the monotony of her life. But now she was faced with the painful truth that she had neglected herself, her marriage, and everything she had once cherished. In the weeks that followed, the sessions with the therapist became a test of endurance. Mark and Anna struggled to find common ground, and Anna could see that while he was trying to work through his pain, a part of him was starting to close off. He was still angry, still hurt, but he was beginning to question if he could ever forgive her. He wanted to for the sake of their children, for the sake of their family, but the damage was deep, and forgiveness seemed like an impossible mountain to climb. At home, the tension was unbearable. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt cold and foreign. Every conversation with Mark seemed strained, as if they were two strangers trying to rebuild something that had been lost. Anna found herself wishing for the past, wishing for the days when they were happy and in love. But those days were gone, replaced by the harsh reality of their broken marriage. Through it all, David was still there, lurking in the background, though Anna began to realize that he was not the answer. He had promised her a fresh start, but she was beginning to see that what she had with him was based on fantasy, not reality. He was a man of power and influence, and the attention he gave her was intoxicating, but it was also shallow and self-serving. He wasn't there to help her heal. He was there because he had seen an opportunity, and she had let herself fall into his trap. Anna knew that if she truly wanted to rebuild her life, she needed to let go of the affair completely. But that was easier said than done. She felt as though she had lost a part of herself in the process. The idea of being with Mark again, of repairing the damage she had caused, felt like an insurmountable task. Yet as she sat across from him one evening, both of them silent as they sipped their coffee, she realized something. No matter how hard it was, no matter how painful the road ahead would be, she still wanted to try. She still wanted to fight. For their family, Anna had a long road ahead of her, one filled with regret, with the painstaking process of rebuilding trust.